Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets. Our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, and tax prep and planning are all under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com. Why do most resolutions fail by mid-January? Maybe it's because we're starting in the wrong place. Before we can sustain any meaningful change, we need to know why we're doing it in the first place. Dr. Jennifer Dragonette and I dig into the difference between purpose and objectives and why confusing the two can leave you feeling empty even when you do hit your goals. We talk through George Kinder's 3 questions. It's a powerful framework that uses time horizons to cut through the noise and reveal what actually matters. We also explore this really unusual eulogy exercise, the permission trap that keeps people stuck even when they have the means to act, and why retirement, I've said this often, is one of the most underrated life transitions you'll ever face. This week, try writing your own eulogy or obituary. Not to be morbid, but to get clear on what you want people to say about you when you lived. That clarity can become the foundation for every objective you set and the purpose you're willing to go after. Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Jennifer Dragonette. All right, Dr. Jen Dragonette, welcome back to the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast. I feel like I've missed you. Like we've gotten off schedule. We didn't record anything in December, and now we're here at the end of January, and we're finally getting to have a conversation again.
Yeah, I've missed you too, Paul. It's great to see you again, and I know we all got a little wild over the holidays, so it's nice that things are settling back in, and you're settling into tax season, which I know is exciting for you.
Yes, very much so. As we were talking about before I hit record, I've got something new that I'm trying out with my Tama families this tax season, and I think it'll be eye-opening for some, scary for others, and just downright, I don't know if mesmerizing is the right word, but when people see some of the numbers, I think they'll be surprised and give them a jolt maybe to do something different, which I think kind of leads into what we're going to talk about today is the new year and how we can position ourselves to try to accomplish what we want. I think every new year is exciting, and resolutions get a lot of attention, and I was doing some research and it really surprised me that what they call Quitter's Day is like January 17th. And we're recording this on January 29th. So we're already like 2 full weeks almost beyond the typical day that most people give up on their resolutions. And I'm sure that most people that go to the gym like on a regular basis are probably glad that that's happened because maybe the gyms are a little less crowded now.
Yep.
But I think that's where I really wanted to focus our conversation today is to talk through what people can really do to provide themselves with sustaining objectives throughout the year without too high or too low, kind of like the stock market, which I get a lot of questions on. Like, how do I manage my emotions around those? Because like a lot of people are like, ready to jump out of a building, not figuratively, but so I think that's where I really wanted to kind of start our conversation and guide us through this. And I know we'll probably talk about George Kender, which I don't think we've talked about on the show in the year and a half plus that you and I have been doing these conversations together about his 3 questions, and we can go through those. But I think probably the best place to start is, I focus a lot on purpose, which is different than objectives or goals. And so I feel like I've been talking a long time now. Why don't I turn it over to you and have you walk us through like how you work with people in your practice, and maybe how to highlight the differentiation between purpose and objectives and goals. And then there will be something I want to follow up with on the other side of that.
I really like that word purpose, Paul. And, for me, you'll be shocked. It makes me think of values, which is, pretty close and maybe just a little bit different. But just to anchor that, if anybody hasn't heard us talk about values before, I think determining what our real driving values are as humans is one of the most important things that we can do. And when I think about trying to make changes or set intentions or make resolutions or any of those things, before we know what our purpose is, before we know what our values are, it's like we're remodeling our house on top of a shaky foundation. Where
we're still going through our remodeling, right? That's funny you said that.
Was that a trigger word, Paul? Sorry about that.
Yeah, that was a trigger word.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So, we'll hold that for a second, right? What if you were about to start the remodel and you were all ready to do this, you had all the plans and the budget, and then your general contractor said, hey, Paul, there's a real problem with your foundation. If you said, well, I don't care, I don't want to know about it, go ahead with the remodel, which is often what we're kind of doing in our life. Like, I'm going to do this, what those of us who've ever worked in the addiction field call a flight into health, right? I'm going to change everything about my life. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to go to the gym every day. It's not sustainable. A, it's too much. And B, we don't really know why we're doing it. So, when we take the time to pause and figure out, and often this needs to be a conversation because it's kind of hard to do on our own. It's possible, but it really helps to talk to people about it, even friends or partners. We can make clear to our own selves why we're doing these things and why we want to stick with these things when it gets hard. And I'm saying when it gets hard, not if it gets hard. Because it always does. If it were easy to lead a life of purpose, if it were easy to live in accordance with our values all the time, we would do it. And it would be so wonderful because we'd be living a purposeful life and it would feel great and easy and no friction. And so obviously, there's friction. When we want to live with purpose, we run into, barricades or obstacles or challenges or discomfort. Often, I think we've talked about this, that we're either moving in the direction of our values or purpose, or we're avoiding some aspect of our experience. And we can certainly dive into that more. But I think, for now, when we know the why for us, why is this the goal that I have right now? Why is this my purpose? What am I hoping to accomplish? Not so much as of an objective, but why is this important to me? Why do I want to go to the gym every day? Is it because I want to be able to run a marathon? Right? Is it because I'm training for something? Is it because my kids have taken up running and I want to be able to join them? Having a sense of the why then helps us in those moments when we really don't want to, or we have to decide between one really important thing and another really important thing. So the purpose, I think, is that foundational component of these life choices.
Do you see purpose and why simultaneously, like the same word, same meaning, or do you have some kind of differentiation between the two?
I see them as a little bit different. There's a lot of overlap, purpose and why and values and strengths, right? When I think of purpose, I think of kind of all of those things. What is important to me? What am I actually good at? We've seen that. I can't exactly remember the Venn diagram, but it's kind of like your vocation, right? Your things that excite you. And then there's this really beautiful overlap where this is something I can actually do, that I want to do, that I feel good doing, that is very meaningful for me. Whereas a value might be authenticity. And that's great, but it's kind of hard to operationalize or say, okay, so when have I attained authenticity? And with purpose too, I don't think that there's necessarily a checkbox that we can say I have attained my purpose. You and I have talked about the concept of enough many times. And, if we feel like our purpose in life, for me, I'll say, one of the things that I think of as my purpose in life is to destigmatize and depathologize mental health challenges, including things that just normal humans deal with every day because we have nervous systems and memories and brains. And I think that is part of my purpose in life, is to help people understand that this is how it is to be human. It's nothing wrong with you. There are things that we can do to help and shift the way we're thinking about it. And I don't know if I'm ever going to say, I have attained that, right? I get closer and closer. I do more and more of it. But just like values, I think the idea of a purpose is that there can always be more. And I think we feel it when we are living with purpose. We feel excited. Your excitement about the way that you're thinking about tax season is purposeful, right? You want your...
People are still probably shaking their heads on that one.
I know. Well, me too, honestly, but it's not my thing, right? That's your purpose. And, I hear that part of your purpose is to get people excited about thinking about the way that they save and spend, and to get people a little more planful about, what do I really want to be earning money for? And that's very purposeful for you. There are a lot of values behind that, and you're good at it, and you can do it.
I know we've talked about this before. We brought up Dan Sullivan's name before, his book, The Gap and the Gain. And I think what you're hitting on is exactly what I've bought into. But I really believe in this concept that he's kind of developed, where your purpose, this why, you can use the word value in that as well, is you're looking at the horizon and knowing that, like you just mentioned, it's never like you're going to achieve that greater purpose or values, because the horizon's always in front of you. It's you can keep going towards it, and it just keeps moving and moving and moving. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Dan really stresses is what gets people into trouble is when they confuse a objective or a goal with their purpose. Mm-hmm. Because they think that you set a objective or a goal thinking it's your purpose, mm-hmm. and then you get there and then you're very disappointed because, well, what comes next? I've already achieved this.
Yes.
And so one of this whole concept I've been wrestling with and working with my Tama families on for the better part of the last 3 years, where the framework that I use is purpose, objectives, actions. Mm-hmm. And so your purpose is your bigger why. And that's why I wanted to ask your question or that question, or you get your thoughts on how do you necessarily think of purpose, like why, values. I think it's kind of a combination of those two, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then you have these objectives, which you could call a goal. And those objectives or goals support that bigger purpose. And then foundationally, how are those action items I need to take that supports me hitting my objective, which means helping me get closer or to my purpose. Mm-hmm. And so as you complete the hows, the action items to accomplish your objectives can then change. So for example, like if you're saving for college and your kids get to college, you've achieved that objective. Mm-hmm. So what's the next objective? Is it do something philanthropy, pour more into your career because raising kids has been a full-time job in and of itself. Mm-hmm. So how does that structure strike you? And I'd love, if you want to poke holes in it, I'm all for it, because I'm always trying to build that very robust, because I don't want people thinking that their objectives, such as like retirement, like saving for retirement, is their objective. It's not. Their purpose could be something. It's usually much bigger than just retiring.
Yes. If you heard me laugh a second ago, it's because I looked over on my desk and I have a copy of Psychology Today that says "Find Your Purpose" on the cover of it, which I didn't even remember was on my desk. Right? This is up. This is a really important question. It's all over. I haven't even read that one yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And the tagline says, "How to figure out what you truly want in life." And so I do really like the structure that you talked about. Let's hold a couple, like one of those examples that you brought up. College, saving for college, or even having children, right? If we walk around with, my purpose is to save enough money to work hard so I can send my kids to college, that's a great goal. And I would say, okay, why is that important? Because your kids are going to go to college. And as you said, and then what? And what if your kids don't go to college? Do you have no purpose? Right? Or do you lose your purpose when your kids have gone to college? Or what if your purpose in life is to be a parent and you can't, right? So why is that important to you? I want to send my kids to college because I want them to have as many opportunities as possible. And I want them to be able to live lives of value and purpose of their own. And so if they use money to go to college and that helps them do that, fantastic. But I have a greater purpose as a parent to raise children who make good decisions about what they want in life and to use college well, because we all know you can go to college and not get a whole lot out of college.
It can be a very expensive place to find yourself, I tell parents. It
can be a very expensive place to find yourself, or to party, or to mess around, or to, drop out, right? And so they're, buying a house. Right? A lot of people think I must buy a house. That is my purpose, is I want to grow up, get married, buy a house. And I work with a lot of people in their 20s or 30s who get really stuck on these goals, right? Not a purpose, but goals. And then feel so less than or behind because they haven't done those things yet. And we could spend hours talking about why that's hard for people in young adulthood to do these days. But, it kind of points to the challenge with identifying a thing as a purpose, or an attainment as a purpose. Even that tagline, what you truly want in life, I want it to be broader than that, because when we want a thing that we can check off and say, great, I have gotten married. I know a lot of people who have gotten married who then get unmarried, and that can't have been the purpose of their lives, or else now they have no purpose. So the way that you're talking about it, I think is really great, is, figuring out the overarching why, the reasons, the things that we really, I don't want to say things, like the state of being that we're going for. When we've talked about money previously in terms of couples, I've framed it as symbolic. And I think a lot of these things that we think of as purposeful, college, retiring, being a parent, are actually quite symbolic. People have different reasons for wanting to be a parent. People have different reasons for wanting to retire. When I retire, I want to have adventures and travel and spend time with people I love, and so that points
to
my values. I'm going to be on a rock. You're going to be living in a van somewhere. Right?
You're going to be climbing some rock somewhere.
I hope so, and because that is what I want to be able to do in retirement, I need to keep myself healthy. I need to continue to exercise, not because I want to look great in a bikini, but because in 20 years, or maybe less, 15, right? When I retire, I want to be able to be on those rocks, right? So that is my why. And if then I have a day or a week or a month where I don't want to exercise, or I don't want to take care of my body, that purpose, right? I want to have an active life as long as possible with people I love. That purpose drives me because it's a long-term purpose rather than the short-term discomfort.
I think I full disclosure, I have the same problem with this that I think that most people do. Like when you're wrestling with coming back to like, well, how do you define your purpose? How do you define your why? And I think a lot of it is probably just through lived experience, but there's this nuance to it to where you think that you could just sit down and just have this moment of clarity, or you can have a conversation with somebody like you as a therapist, or read a book, and the answer is just going to find them immediately, and it doesn't. And so I wonder how people can work their way through that to actually be able to put pen to paper and identify what it is that what is their bigger purpose, what is their why. And I haven't come up with I have like a couple tools that I use, but I still think that that's one of the biggest, I think, roadblocks that prevent people from really moving forward and identifying that bigger purpose, which then allows them to be able to have these bigger goals or objectives.
I'll tell you how I sometimes work with my clients around this. And then I think this actually might be a great opportunity to pull up George Kinder's questions that you mentioned to me, because I think they're particularly helpful for this. So when I'm working with someone who's trying to find their purpose, which almost everyone is, one thing that I sometimes try with them, which actually can be an independent exercise, and this might sound morbid for a second, is to imagine that they are writing their own eulogy. Or, if we want to do it more image-based or thought experiment, imagine that by some miracle, you're able to come back and attend your own funeral or your own memorial. And the people you love most are speaking about you, and they are saying just the most amazing things that make you so proud of the way that you lived. What would they be saying? Right? That we can get into, and I've had people do really, it's not really about death, it's about living, and how do we want to have lived? Sometimes it's easier if we cast out into the future, which is what makes me think of George Kinder's questions. But I've had people do just such beautiful, literally come back in with a typed up eulogy or an obituary or something for their own selves that talks about, we get to see the purpose and the values in there. I would love for my own eulogy to say, she raised these incredible humans who've gone out and had beautiful relationships with authenticity, and she leaves behind friends who knew her well and loved her as she is and adventured with her, and she had a beautiful marriage and impacted lives of people. And right, that's our purpose. And other people's purposes are going to be different, right? Some people would want to hear, Paul donated so much to these charitable organizations, and because of that, they have thrived in this way. And his 4 children went off and did these things. And, and some people want to say, gosh, if I had the most amazing eulogy, it would say I traveled the world. And right. But you kind of get at, what do we leave? What are we leaving? We're not leaving the house. We're not leaving the job. I don't think anybody really, I take that back. Most people in our eulogy, we're not going to be listing our job titles or how much money we made, right? It's symbolic. Right. What did we do with that education or that money, or what did we do with these people who loved us so much, and how did we impact the world? That's our purpose.
So that's probably a good lead in to talk about, as you mentioned, and we've kind of teased, are these George Kinder 3 questions. And so George Kinder is kind of like one of the fathers of like life coaching, I think, at least from my field of financial planning. And I'll put a link with more resources to George's work, but he offers these 3 questions, and I'm going to look down at my sheet because I'm going to read them kind of verbatim. But the first, and they're all kind of time frame based, is the first question is, what would you do if you were financially secure? And then the second question is what would you do if you only, so the first one is talking about the here and now. The second question is, what would you do if you only had 5 to 10 years to live? So it kind of zooms to the middle distance where, real priorities sharpen against the constant or the constraint of time. And then the last one is, what would you regret not doing if you only had 24 hours left? So this kind of snaps you into like this macro focus on the single detail that defines everything. So we can pull those apart however way you want. But I think in just reading through those again, and this is something we've talked about before, it's something that I've tried, I think it gives people different perspective. Mm-hmm. So what do you want to do with that perspective? Mm-hmm. And within these, 3 different time frames, like mm-hmm. long term, middle term, and then like right now, how can you use these to help you again put that paper to pen and actually mm-hmm. write these things down? Because as we know, research has proven time and time again that when you write down a goal, objective, or in this case, we're talking about really purposes or values or your why, the chances of you either attaining those or working towards that horizon, your chances go up exponentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really loved these questions when you shared them with me. And so maybe we'll take them one by one. That first question, what would you do if you were financially secure? I hear echoes in a kind of a different way of that favorite question of mine that I've shared with you. If you could say anything and it wouldn't be wrong, what would you say? Right? The if, right? We so often would love to do or say or, live all these things in all these different ways, and we hold ourselves back because of XYZ. And sometimes that's a real reason, right? There are absolutely so many people who cannot do the things that they want to do because they don't have the financial resources. And for many, many people, there are small purposeful steps they could take, or there are ways that they could be living more in accordance with their values that might not even depend on money or resources, or, we could move little shifts. And so what would you do if you were financially secure? It speaks to one of the ways that I practice therapy is to ask people to really think of, their own personal suffering list. What are the things that get in their way, or the aspects of themselves they like the least, or, what are the things that they wish were different in their lives or about themselves? And then I ask, how long have you had that thing? And often it's forever, 5 years, 10 years, right? What have you done to try to get rid of that? Because maybe we're not going to get rid of the anxiety completely, or the worry, or the depression, or the family history. And then to kind of fill in the blanks in our minds, if I didn't have this problem, I would do blank, right? And what is that thing? That's what I hear in this question. What would you do if you didn't have the blockage, the barrier, the I can't because? And maybe we can't do that thing immediately, entirely, but perhaps we can do something in that direction. Or maybe we can do that thing. We just worry that then we won't have enough, or, right? So I think that's good to just kind of get that pin in, that's where I want to go, right? That is the thing, or many things, or that is a purposeful direction that I'd really like to go. Okay. And what's so interesting, I love that often our worlds overlap so much, that idea of long-term, middle distance, short-term. I was telling you just before we started recording that I did something very similar with one of my clients the other day, who was really struggling to make a decision that they knew in their heart what they wanted or needed to do, what was the kind of right choice, so to speak. I could tell from knowing them so well what is the choice that they kind of wish they could mobilize to do, and it's uncomfortable, and so there's all sorts of reasons not to. And I framed it kind of like that, where, okay, if you knew you had 40 more years to live, what would you want to do? And they said, well, I've had 40 years, I would definitely want to do this thing because I'd want to have 40 years to enjoy this life that I'm creating. Cool. Okay. What if you only had 10 years?
Hey, this is Dave Jackson, editor of the show. And unfortunately, at this point, we lost Dr. Jen's microphone and there was nowhere that I could get the rest of this conversation back, but we felt that the conversation to this point still brings you value, and so we apologize for kind of cutting her off there. I think you can kind of figure that out. What if you had 10 years? Then how would that change? But let's go back to Paul and his final thoughts.
Hopefully you didn't mind Dr. Jen and I starting with a pretty heavy topic to begin the new year. But it's something that I've always been fascinated with, was this Quitter's Day, which, as I mentioned, came sooner than I thought. It's like the middle of January when people start giving up their resolutions. And so I wanted to pull back on that idea or a thread a little bit to really dig down deeper into figuring out or helping people figure out what their purpose is, their why, and really understanding the difference. And there's a huge difference between your purpose and why and a goal and objective. And that's one of the things that I think are the key takeaway from this conversation with Dr. Jen is understanding the difference between the two. There's also a lot that we covered on perspective and time horizons. And it's something that I've been working with TAMA families with for the last few years on. I didn't bring this up in the episode, but putting yourself in an example where if you're looking at your situation today, are you better off than you were a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? More than likely, if you're listening to this podcast, the answer is probably yes. So Jen and I take a stab at going through George Kinder's 3 life questions. And she gives a really great example of a client that she's working with on this, where it's like you're trying to make a decision. And when you put it in a time horizon, like she did for 40 years, would you do it? Well, yes. Well, what if you only had 10 years? Would you still do it? Well, it's even bigger. Heck yes. And if it's a year, it's like, hell yeah. Like, we want to get this done now. So, and enjoy kind of the fruits of your labor, if you will. So, a lot to unpack, but my objective with having this conversation at this point in time at a new year was to get you thinking about how to define your purpose and values. And again, another great resource is Dan Sullivan's book, The Gap and the Gain. So hopefully you get a lot out of it and can set your purpose or your why, and then identify those underarching objectives and goals to help you get there. If you've enjoyed this conversation, could you do me a favor? Do you know anyone else who would enjoy these types of conversations where we talk about the intersections of our emotional and financial lives? Because if you do, it's actually going to help both of us. Could you share this conversation with someone? They will think you're great because you just gave them this terrific podcast, and it helps me grow my audience. Or you can tell them to go to tamacapital.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.